Welcome back to a new episode of the Win More, Live Better podcast. And today I'm joined by somebody who I think is truly special for a number of reasons. It's Josh Chambers. Now, we're going to get into his bio, his background, kind of what he's doing now. I think he holds one of the most unique positions that you're going to find in all of college athletics. But where I wanted to quickly just make a note before I welcome Josh officially is I wanted to just share a couple of things as to why I really wanted to bring Josh into this conversation. I think first and foremost is he has, I think, one of the most unique journeys to the role that he's in. And again, a role that is one of the more unique ones that you're going to find in college sports and the impact that he has. He's an unbelievable storyteller. He's got, I think, one of the more creative minds that I've found when it comes to leadership and culture. And I'm really excited for others to get a chance to get a glimpse into how his mind works. But then on top of that, I also know he is one of the most avid learners, like somebody that's constantly looking to grow. Great example of this yesterday. I see this awesome tweet from Josh where he kind of shares a little bit of his process for how he reads, how he not just absorbs information, but then the manner in which you kind of sort it, you organize it, and then you're one of those great people where you take it and you actually apply it and you actually share it and curate it with the world. So I'm really just excited to give everybody else that maybe aren't as familiar with your work and your impact, and honestly, just more than anything, I think your heart. So, Josh, thank you so much for taking some time for today's conversation.
Thanks, Zach, man. I appreciate it. I know we've been friends a long time, but I don't know if I've ever told you this directly, but I've always viewed you kind of as a mentor or someone I can learn from, and have taken a ton of wisdom and nuggets from you from afar. And I'm just grateful. When you asked, I was super excited. I was fired up about the opportunity, not just to get a rep at speaking and sharing and learning, but get an hour or so with someone I really respect, and obviously a lot of overlap in our skill sets or what we do. I think that uh, I think that's healthy for me to be around, and you're one of the trailblazers in the industry, and I love seeing you kind of crush it in a new industry, and with this podcast. And so I was really pumped up when you asked, and can't thank you enough for your time.
Yeah, no, I'm stoked. The respect is completely mutual, and I do want to jump into the role per se, but I think before I do so, I would almost be more interested to start for those that are again maybe less familiar with you and maybe even just beyond the quote unquote resume. If we really needed or wanted to know who Josh Chambers really is, like what are some of the things that you think are important that other people should know about who you are as a person? As just kind of a starting point for us that maybe we won't always find in more of a public forum.
Yeah, good question. First, I would say to start off, I'm deeply competitive, and I think that that just comes from uh, my upbringing in a family with three brothers and one sister, all kind of similar ages, and being in sports and being around highly competitive atmospheres, whether that be in the classroom, on the field, or at home, playing video games. I have a brother who's a head coach at a Division I university, UTRGV. I'm obviously in college basketball, and then my other two brothers are in very competitive industries. So I think that shapes a lot of my mission. I'm obsessed with finding ways to get better. I live for the aha moments of creating that structural understanding around something that can help someone or help myself or help my family get to where they want to be, or complete a task, or reach a goal. That really drives me, and fills up my proverbial cup. And I think, again, I think it all goes back to being family oriented, and obviously having some um, adversity and trials like anyone does in their upbringing or their young life. I think I just have a deep appreciation for every challenge I face. I think each one taught me something I couldn't have learned any other way other than going through it. And so what felt like adversity at the time, at every stage in my life, I think was preparation in disguise. And I'm living that out in real time. And I'm just so grateful for those setbacks that kind of shaping my perspective, strengthened my resilience, and allowed me to have tools that I now rely on in such a cool industry. And and taking that competitive spirit and that desire to learn and grow, and using those life lessons that I've kind of learned along the way. Looking back, I think those, not to be cliche and quote, the one of the best writers of all time, Ryan Holiday, but I think those obstacles were at the time viewed as detours from the path that I was on, and maybe they were going to slow me down. And I realized, and it's become a real core part of my identity, that those were the path. And having to go through those, they developed me. They gave me the responsibility and opportunities that I have today. And so I'm super grateful for who I am, but more importantly, what I've been through that shaped that end product, or the product that you see today.
I think one of the things that I really appreciate about what you just shared is, well, actually, there's two things. One of which is I love the idea of being obsessed with getting better and like the love for those aha moments. You may be familiar with him, Billy Oppenheimer. He's
Mm-hmm.
kind of Ryan Holiday's, obviously. Speaking of Ryan Holiday, as writing assistants and done a lot for him, and he has his own newsletter. And I heard him on a podcast share once that, like, a lot of people we talk a lot about dopamine and how do we get all of our dopamine hits. And he said a lot of people, it's all based around likes and follows and things on social recognition. He's like, his dopamine hits are when he has those aha moments. And when he shared that, I was like, ooh, I feel that for sure. Like, I feel really similar. Anytime you find a story, a new moment, a new connection that you can make, I think is a lot of fun. But I also appreciate what you shared because it is so relevant, I think, to the work that you do now and the impact and the service that you have on the staff, the players, everybody involved there, even your own family, like hearing you kind of go through some of the different things and so forth in your journey thus far, like that is really important. So I appreciate you kind of expanding a little bit on that. Let's kind of go to this role, director of process, because again, I think, you can look at coaching staffs on different programs, websites. It's generally not going to be a role that you're going to necessarily see, at least by title. For those that might be curious, like what exactly goes into that, and in essence, in your own words, how would you describe the role that you play for Maryland's basketball team?
Yeah.
Being
So how I define process, and I've joked with my wife, I workshop this answer because it's become a real conversation point, and I had to get it down from the 20-minute long-winded answer to hopefully a more concise and an answer with a little bit more clarity. But in my opinion, process is the mechanics of your approach, and so we're all human and we all have an approach. And if you wanted a more traditional comparison of what that role looks like, I mean, mindset coach, basketball coach, towel boy, corner man. If you're a boxing guy, I like to say what I mean by process is I want to give clarity and urgency to everyone in our program when they need it the most. And I also want to do it in a way that speaks life to them. And so I think that's a wide range or a broad mission, right? And I think what it comes down to is my job is to design systems for our team, for our organization, from a physical, from a mental, from an emotional standpoint, that improve their efficiency and effectiveness in terms of getting to the person that they want to become, both individually and collectively. Right? We have a mission as a team, and me as a coach, as a husband, as a worker, as a thinker. I have a mission as a person, right? And so I think if you go upstream enough, past our titles, past what facade or who we think we are, or portray ourselves as, we're all human, right? And uh, we all have a mission or a goal or a human like yearning to accomplish. And I think at the core of that is we're all problem solvers, right? And so when I look at my role or my title, I don't view it any different as yours. I don't view it any different as coaches. I think we use our individual skill sets in a way that makes sense toward what our team or our family or our personal scenario or environment call for. But I think we're problem solvers, and I think as performers, we're often not defined by the problems that we face, but the quality of those processes that we use to solve them, if that makes sense. And so I spend a lot of time thinking about every facet of our organization and trying to figure out how can we make it a little bit more better so that person A and team A can be the best version of themselves, if that makes sense.
I love that. I love that for a number of reasons. And I'm gonna come back to the problem solving just in a moment. But when you, one thing I appreciate about you, again, not to keep adding to that, but like I think you're incredibly intentional with a lot of what you do. And I think that's an important piece to, I think, how you show up in a lot of different settings and ways. When you use that word or those two words earlier, clarity and urgency, I'm aware that there's a lot of intentionality behind why you maybe choose those words. I actually just for a moment be interested to know like what makes those two words so important either for you and or like team, the program, like what is it about those two words specifically that you're trying to help create or play a role in for the people that have touch points in the program?
Yeah, great question. I think with clarity and urgency, what you're really trying to do is turn ideas into behaviors, right? Um, whether we're teaching a ball screen coverage or we're explaining our team rules or we're going through how we travel or our standards off the court in the classroom, they're all ideas at some point, right? And getting them across the spectrum to becoming a behavior, something that we routinely do day in and day out, whether you're a coach, whether you're a player, whether you're a manager, there's a gap there. And I think you can solve problems a multitude of different ways. And the time it takes to solve that problem will be a variable in whatever amount of clarity or amount of urgency you use, right? Like if clarity and urgency are high, that time is going to be short. And if clarity and urgency aren't a part of your process, you may feel like you're banging your head against the wall. And it's going to take a long time to come to the realization that I may need to solve this a different way. And so I think that time just gets longer. And so I think taking complex and making it simple is a large part of what I try to do when I interact with coaches, when I interact with our players, when I interact with my self talk, like trying to take a bunch of information, look around the landscape of college athletics, college football, college basketball, college baseball, anything, even outside athletics, anything I can take as a anchor point or something that I can learn from, and then transferring it back to our world in a way that's maybe unravels some of the complexities of our world and allows our guys to skip a few steps in their understanding. And I think that's what clarity and urgency is, right? It's removing friction points in time and figuring out how can we do something, solve a problem, accomplish a goal in the most effective way. Like what's A to B look like, and let's try to show them those steps and maybe be cheerleaders or support systems in that pursuit.
I love that distinction that you brought up earlier in terms of like, I mean, I think this is where like you have so many touch points across like the way in which you look at the program, the way that you look at the impact that you have. Like we're not just talking about the mental, we're not just talking about the cultural, we're not just talking about leadership, like every bucket, every moment, like you're looking for those like 1% opportunities. And I love too that idea like shifting the ideas or insights to behavior. And one thing that we know that can sometimes create distance between those two things is one complexity, which we as human beings can sometimes be really good at, in essence, doing. But then also to your point of like helping people distill that down into like clarity of like what is the next best step that I can take, or and how do I create this process around that? To me, I loved what you shared earlier about just and I'm going to kind of butcher how you exactly said it, but the idea of like helping people develop a really good process for how they are approaching the problems and things that they're trying in essence to solve. So with that, could you kind of you've alluded to I think some in your own way, but when you the role that you play, especially kind of like that cornerman for the team, cornerman for Buzz Williams, who's obviously one of the brightest leaders that I think you're going to find in not just college basketball but
For
in
sure.
sports. What are some of those big problems that you all find yourself kind of routinely trying to solve, either for players, the program, or anything else that you think your role encompasses?
Yeah, I think the biggest ones I focus are the ones that are in the gaps between intention and execution. I think every team has on their walls or somewhere in their practice facility who they want to be or what their intention is, and they may have a document that says those things in a more succinct way, and the coaches may even reiterate those things in practice or in team meetings. I think every program has that, right? And where my role, I think, where I like to think I'm the connective tissue between whether it be strategy or recruiting or evaluation or operations, all of those things kind of, again, go back to solving the problem of how can we be the best team we can be. I like to focus on what is the execution demand of this intention. If we say we want to be the best team in the country at note taking, what does that mean? And go through those things, those steps, and let's make that happen. And I think a lot of that you have to have a humility or a humbleness that says I'm not going to hit a roadblock and say we can't do it. You kind of have to remove can't from your vocabulary. There may be a caveat that you can include in the solution that hey, this was this, but then that, and I think that will determine a little bit of what the final outcome looks like. But I think having an open mind and being almost humble or having enough humility to say I might not know the answer initially, but I can figure it out. I think my role is just removing the friction from the process of whatever that is. If it's to be the best note taking team, I want to take out as many friction points or roadblocks, in essence, that are in the way from us becoming that. And I think to go back and answer your question, uh, I think the landscape is changing faster than it's ever changed. And to go back to your original question, I think almost removing certain things that you're doing or certain problem solving processes that you may have thought worked at a time. You have to self audit constantly because of the pace of change. NIL, transfer portal. Obviously, these are very overly talked about constraints or new variables in the game that we're playing as a college basketball program. There's a great quote by Peter Drucker that there is nothing so useless as doing efficiently that which should not be done at all. And I think that's a great reminder that I was talking with Coach Williams about this the other day. A lot of the things that programs still do, I think, were designed for a time that does not exist anymore. 20 years ago, you had the head coach and three assistants, maybe an ops guy. And so you carried more buckets that you probably could or was efficient to carry because that was all the human power that you had. And so now when more organizations are looking like NFL or NBA front offices, it might not make sense to approach a problem that way, right? Like the head coach probably doesn't need to do A, B, C, D, E, F, G. It could probably stop at D and delegate E, F, and G, right? And so I think taking that concept or that philosophy and applying it to a bunch of different things we're doing in terms of what problems we're solving. That's on the court, in between the lines, in a timeout huddle, how we evaluate recruits. I think evaluation has become a really big leverage point. It's one of my big beliefs that complaining about the rule changes or the constant change and almost criminal level of lack of rules and structure around what we call our jobs right now is useless. And there's a lot of times in history where there was similar time or similar level of whether it be wild west mentality or lack of structure, where a lot of people got rich and took advantage of the situation. I think having a mindset of that, more of an abundance mindset, more of a creation mindset towards your problems, and almost figuring out, okay, what do we need to do that can continue to work and double down on, and then what things do we need to eliminate from our process that may just be wasted energy.
That ties in really well to, the emphasis that you brought up earlier on like execution, right? At the end of the day, like we can have all the great ideas, we can, come up with good plans, and then at the end of the day, it's like how well or did we not, execute. That also certainly comes in the form of, the culture and everything that you all instill, but it also shows up with players for just a moment, and we'll come back to the broader the team and the culture per se, but I think on an individual player level, Could you expand a bit on how your role shows up in more of like the player or the skill development process? Like, are there one or two examples that maybe you could give as to like maybe ways in which you try to help players, particularly on that execution side of things?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I think that question is answered by another question. How do I get the individual organization to think more clearly? And so that could be in the form of a conversation, that could be in the form of a video, that could be in the form of a note, that could be in the form of a meeting, that could be in the form of actually going to a third party to intervene in a situation, having a conversation with Coach Williams, having a conversation with Coach Wolf, who's our offensive coordinator, about XYZ player. I think there's tons of different mediums that would address that problem, and they're all almost funneled to the one outcome that is desired, which is how can we become more consistent as people, as a team? How can we make sure that our habits and our standards and the way that we operate on a day in and day out basis, regardless of what's going on in the environment, whether it's hailing and snowing and thunderstorming and there's 90 miles per hour winds, we're not getting knocked off our line. And so I try to figure out different projects. Coach gives me a ton of autonomy. He lets me sit in on every single meeting, whether it be an X's and O's meeting to what color is the paint going to be in our practice facility meeting, and have a little bit of input and maybe a little bit of direction on those things that can hopefully, you mentioned it earlier, which I love the concept of just 1%, right? Just finding the 1% in everything we do. And hopefully that compounds into something that really shows up on the scoreboard over time.
I think, again, I think there's so much like richness that we can get into in this conversation with like the role that you play, particularly on the culture side of things, which I know is a big broad term and we'll unpack that a bit. But I would imagine it's maybe difficult to just jump straight in without maybe talking a little bit about Buzz because you've obviously spent a lot of time together, right? Way before your time here at Maryland. Um, and so I would almost be interested to start with I'm sure there's a list, a long list, but if there have been some kind of core lessons that you feel like you've really taken from Buzz that pertain to culture, leadership, or just program building, what have been some of the ones that have been most poignant for you?
Yeah, I would say the biggest one, there's definitely a few that come to mind. I think sustainable culture is built through extraordinary attention to detail. I think Coach Williams embodies that. I think he is the poster child for delayed gratification. I think as humans, there's a natural tendency to overvalue the visible and undervalue the structural. And I think what Coach Williams does so well, and what's made him such a impactful leader, not just in wins and losses, but in my opinion, in the wider windows of really having touched human beings' hearts and positively affected their trajectory over the course of life in terms of who they are going to marry and what types of careers they're going to have, and things with real weight that kind of supersede how you feel at the end of a children's game like basketball. He's had a ton of success in that arena, no pun intended, as well. But I think he's so he's so almost laser microscopic, extraordinarily focused on the details of everyone's life, of their game, of how our offices ran, things that you wouldn't even think of. I think that's what's been a huge separator for him. How he organizes practice, how he communicates, his expectations of you. Like he's gonna even find details in his relationship with you that you don't even know exist. And I think that's what makes that relationship feel so personal and intimate. And so I think being able to learn from osmosis, those things have been huge for my development. And honestly, I've been around a lot of great leaders, which I think I don't take for granted. And Coach Williams is definitely he's definitely up there with the best. And there's a great John Wooden quote. I think it's the little things make the big things happen. And I think Coach Buzz, he personifies that. he's not really gonna overvalue the visible. The visible is important to him, but it's almost like that illustration of the iceberg, where you can see the tip, and then underneath the ocean is miles and miles and pounds, millions of pounds of stone that go into that visible outcome. Coach Williams is going to be as intentional and focused on that bottom part as the size and how overwhelming the girth of it is.
The the intentionality to details was is so apparent. And again, like, Buzz is one of those incredible leaders that, routinely you see viral clips, right, come up, and you see that you can quickly gauge the he thinks differently than I think a lot of the leaders. And it's well, I remember the first time that we met, and we were on this call, and we had Buzz on there, and our manager, and we were sitting there talking, and it was very quick. Like, you quickly picked up on some of that intentionality, especially to the details, and how he does not just the program but his own life, which I think is really cool. The other thing, though, that I think is important, maybe to pause briefly here, is you mentioned, obviously, he is certainly not the only person that you've had as a mentor and as somebody that has helped shape your views on leadership and so forth. One of those also is George Raveling. And I would love, maybe in the same light for you, for those that might be unfamiliar or less familiar with, kind of where your ties with George come into play, maybe speak to that briefly, but then also what have been some of those takeaways for, again, another person, a legend, a Hall of Famer, and somebody whose impact is, I think, going to be felt for a very, very long time, not just in basketball, but even beyond.
Yeah, Coach Raveling, I was more lucky than I deserve. I didn't even realize it. I was too naive at the time to even take full advantage of it. But he hired me when I was 22 years old, um, and he didn't hire me as his assistant. He didn't hire me as his intern. He didn't hire me as even like a junior associate. He looked at me in the eyes and he said, "Josh, you're going to be my partner." And I want you to tell me when you have ideas, and I want you to disagree with me, and I want you to be vulnerable. And for a 22-year-old who lost his dad at 17 and had no idea what I was going to do with my life, and was just kind of thrown into the fire of, hey, this is leadership. This is what it means to be in a zero sum game that's highly competitive, and there's high stakes every day in every corner. For someone with that resume and that level of power, or that level of accolades achieved, and clout in the sport, and in general, in human culture, to look at me, I didn't deserve to hear that by anyone, let alone a Hall of Fame human being like Coach Rav. And so I spent a year under his wing, basically, and got to brush shoulders with some incredible human beings who were way smarter than I'll ever be, and just pick their brains and hear conversations that I wasn't supposed to hear. And it really shaped not only my outlook on life, but uh, the level of gratitude I have for my path and my journey. And again, going back to the adversity I've faced, I've also been a turtle on a fence post where, Coach Rab and Coach Buzz and all of the coaches and leaders that I've been exposed to and mentors, they've moved me along and helped me and given me traits that I know I can use today and help impact our players with, and hopefully help our staff maybe make their jobs a little bit easier. And that's not something I take for granted. And so Coach Rav, he's the best human being I've ever met, bar none. And his superpower was he was the best human being anyone's ever met. His ability to connect and talk to you and empower you to think deeper than you've ever thought, to have ideas bigger than you ever imagined, and make you feel like you were the most important person at the time. But not only think it, he would ask you to act on it, and that really equipped me for, I think, my second stint working for Coach Williams, to be vulnerable and be aggressive in my ideas, to push back a little bit, to tell him what I honestly thought, because Coach Rapp had instilled a lot of those things in me already. And so I think that's how trust forms, right? Like, This is another great quote, and ironically, it's a Rav quote as far as I know. But if two people agree on everything, one of them's irrelevant, right? So I think when Coach Williams hired me, I think I helped in a sense that I would tell him what I thought, the truth, and a lot of time it wasn't what he wanted to hear; it was what he needed to hear. And I think that made my position or my role or my title or my being valuable to him in the way he wanted to operate. And so I owe a lot of that to Rav. My ability to form that relationship. That's now I consider Coach Williams like a father like figure, like I did Coach Rav. I have kind of that similar relationship with Buzz because I was able to take some of those lessons I learned, and they really were tools in my toolbox as I began my coaching career here with Coach Williams.
Both are, just incredible, not just leaders as you're describing, but just human beings for how who they are and how they show up, away from the court, away from the job. And so to have someone like that, first and foremost, is already incredibly impactful. But then as you mentioned, to also have someone maybe in a time in a period in your life where that becomes even more valuable in essence, and kind of how they help support and guide and shape you in your journey. So I appreciate you speaking about both. And I know both in many ways, again, probably not the only, certainly not the only two, but have very much influenced now this role that you play, that I don't know that you, if you would use this word or not, but I think you are in essence part of the architecture, or an architect for the culture and for the program and for the program that you're in. And so I'm interested just for you on a personal level, but then also as kind of that partner now for Buzz. How do you, broadly speaking, when you think about culture and what goes into that and starting point and building and things like that, where do you begin?
I always say first, culture is how you live, not what you say. So, habits in action are a huge part of what we do, or at least what I try to do in my daily attack of building what we have going within our building. I think repeated actions shape identity, and identity shapes behavior under pressure, and that's really what we're trying to do, right? You can act a certain way when there's no one in the gym. You can act a certain way when you're at home, and there's no stakes. But when the adversity rises and you can kind of feel that pressure, and maybe you get a little bit more anxious, and maybe there's some things going on that you don't like, from a human level, from an emotional level, from a physical level. Maybe you're tired. Maybe in your mind you don't believe in yourself. Those are all, I think, pressures, right? And I think it's easy to say something and it's hard to do something when that pressure is apparent. And so I think when we talk about culture, it's very little. Here's a sign on a graphic. Here's a video. Here's an NFL team and what they do. We use some of that, sure, but we're going to teach by doing a lot of times too. We're going to put our staff and our players in situations where you're going to feel the fire, and you're going to train that muscle of here's the environment that we create each day, and we're going to define what matters most to us in those habits and in those actions. Did we communicate clearly? And did we build routines that make those values visible in how we practice and how we compete and how we meet and how we interact? Because all those things are going to come out. What you practice in the dark comes out in the light. I truly believe that that those things that we do with our guys in preseason, that we do with our guys, early mornings. We've and when we talk about culture, that's it. It's hard to define because it's not it's not a message. It's not a way that we talk. It's not the language that we use. It's not the rhythm of our approach to work. It's kind of all of that together, and it's the people that enact that that really, I think, hammer that point home. I think there's a quote by Abraham Maslow: "Be who you say you are." I think you can say these things, and even as I'm saying it on camera, I'm like, it sounds kind of like for show, and I think there's nothing wrong with that, right? Like this is all kind of for show. We're in an entertainment business, and we're trying to perform at a high level. But if you're going to say it, there's a human standard or a recognition, game recognized game. If you've heard that cliche before, if you're going to say it and not do it, I think it all falls apart and people lose trust and or the urgency and clarity that we're talking about. It kind of evaporates. If you're going to do it and say it, I think that's when you have real compound effect as far as your culture goes in determining what those behaviors become in the long run.
So I know your time with Buzz obviously extends well beyond, just what you've now had as year one at Maryland and then prior at A&M and even going back even further. But I'm interested maybe to just use these last two as a comparison for a moment. Could you talk a little bit about what this process has looked like year one? I mean, a lot of it probably along the lines of what you just described at Maryland, but then anything else that you would add with that, but then in how that compares to a place like A&M where I want to say it was was it 6 seasons or
Yeah, 6 seasons at Texas A&M.
6 seasons? So just, maybe kind of like what that culture work looked, because it's one thing to do it year one. And like, I think, we talked about this even the other night of like, culture is not a set it and forget it, like you can't just do it once and
Mhm.
it kind of takes care of itself. So for you, if you could maybe kind of compare and contrast those different spaces in that transition, I would be interested.
Yeah, I would love to. One the for starters, I would say, regardless of it was 6 years ago or it was last year, obviously a lot has changed in that window of time. Uh, I think the standards have to show up consistently, no matter where you're at or what industry you're in, what your title is, or what the rules are surrounding the game or the business that you're in. And I think the standards that we try to hold ourselves to are, we're all going to be accountable of the language we use when we're around one another or with our players, and that it's all on the same page. Because I think that's your standards in the present. I think we're all gonna have standards of the stories that we tell. So how we remember certain things. There's not going to be revisionist history, because those are the ways we learn from the past. And I think the decisions that we make, we're going to have a level of standards for that as well, because that's going to determine our future habits, outcomes. Those decisions are forward looking, and I think that the core piece, I think that gets forgotten a lot in terms of culture building, and it impacts all three: the past, the present, and the future. And maybe it's just the economics background in me, but the behaviors that we celebrate, I think that touches all of them. I think it impacts uh, everything you do as a culture. It's at the core. It's what do you incentivize, right? What behaviors do you incentivize? And I think so. I think that element of here's your standards and here's what they look like from what we did at Virginia Tech. Now we're at A&M. Here's what they are year one at A&M. Here's what they're going into year two at A&M. Like those things will stay timeless, whether we're at Maryland or whether we're at my high school. Those things are never changing. And so, but what I do think changed drastically is the level of uncertainty went way up. Right, we didn't know who was going to be on our roster in our first year at Maryland. That was different, certainly, than first year at Texas A&M. We didn't know which staff would be there. We didn't know how much we would have to pay a roster. There was a ton of uncertainty. So I think year one, in contrast to that Texas A&M year one, was about fundamentally reducing uncertainty. I think we were building an operating system from the ground up while the environment around us was circling and changing and almost tornadoing at a rapid pace. And I think in today's landscape of transfers, NIL, constant roster movement, you can't assume continuity anymore, unfortunately. And so that was a huge, drastic change in terms of what we attacked year one with in the past. And I've done two of these rebuilds to what it is now. And I think keeping keeping those timeless standards and those timeless truths and figuring out, okay, how can we not copy and paste, but take this secret sauce, and then we just want to shorten the gap between when a player arrives on campus, between how when they fully understand how we think, work, compete, essentially who we are, right? That general overarching word of identity, right? We want to shorten that gap. And I think in an environment that's constantly changing, the competitive advantage is how fast can you create alignment? And I think figuring out how to be concise with your words, how to expedite human emotion, being vulnerable among one another, shared suffrage, getting past the monotony or the pleasantries of introductions as fast as we could, so that we could start to form that cohesion as a team and as humans, in our interactions and how we competed. I think that was a big stark difference in the year one at A&M, or even at Virginia Tech, and the year one at University of Maryland.
I've had this conversation in a form with others, and I think you described this and articulated this a little bit more eloquently than I have. But I love that emphasis on the speed of alignment, and I do think very much so. To your point, that is now one form of advantage that you're going to see top programs or programs that hopefully sustainably win, especially just again given the turnover, how quickly can we expedite the trust building, the relationship building, the shared understanding, and then that next level, that shared ownership
That's
of
right.
standards and values and all that. So I love that. One thing that you've in essence described with some of this is obviously the language, and then I think you're describing a lot how important it is to operationalize it. But even going back to something that you shared earlier, and we've had conversations about this in the past, like it is a different mindset that you're describing when you talk about, it's one thing to want to like lead the nation in, not just the wins, right? Not just, points allowed, points score, right? And I'm not the basketball person, so there's probably a lot of other metrics that are certainly more important. However, when you describe, hey, we want to be the best in the nation at note taking, right? And that's just one form of it. Could you talk a little bit about that mindset and how you all emphasize that in, again, not just about the outcomes, but about the inputs?
Yeah, I think that's everything, right? I think your inputs determine your outputs. And in the business of winning, you have to be consumed and obsessed with your inputs. What are you putting into your body? What are you watching? Who are you listening to? Uh, what is your eye diet? What is your ear diet? And then ultimately, it's what is your belief diet? What is your operating system? What is your I belief system? I believe this. Um, those things, if they're rooted to outcomes, you're gonna going back to that adversity and stress and pressure cooker that we know competition can be, or we know daily life can be at times. If those are the things that you're anchoring to, they're the outcomes, or they're the way that you shot the ball 24 hours ago. You're gonna ride a roller coaster of regret, and you're gonna ride that roller coaster, and you're gonna get off at the exact same spot you were. And I think what we try to do, and what I try to help Coach Williams with, is we really try to uh, focus on the outcome, or focus on the process over the outcomes. It's everything we design our time around. It's when we train, when we practice, the intentionality behind how we're getting reps, what we're teaching. I mean, we probably spend just as much, if not more, time in the film room than we do on the court, and a lot of that is what you're saying. It's not necessarily even all about basketball. Like we're going to teach lessons that are input driven, meaning how do you carry yourself? Like that's going to take place on a basketball court. But again, it's one of those structural things. Whether you shake hands or you introduce yourself, do you give dap after a teammate scores? Do you celebrate others' success? Do you work out early in the morning, or do you like to sleep in? Do you get extra after practice, or are you the first one to get out of the building? These are all inputs, right? They're things that you can control that go into your process or your approach. Again, going back to the mechanics of how you are as a problem solver. And we try to really uh, teach slash incentivize our guys to lean into that belief system. But that takes a little bit of conviction, right? Like that, a lot of those payoffs are invisible at first. You don't necessarily reap the rewards of shooting 1,000 shots right after practice that first day. Yeah, I like to equate it to going into the weight room and bench pressing, 180 pounds, for the first time. You don't, it's not like you walk out of there and you're like, oh, I'm way stronger. But if you go to the weight room 60 straight days and you're bench pressing the same set, same reps, even the same weight, I can guarantee you're going to be stronger. But that cliche bamboo effect, that's reality. What are you putting in to the present moment? Going back to Coach Williams' genius, and I think that's a lot of this is just downstream from his leadership and his culture building and architect skills. It's that delayed gratification, it's that marshmallow test in everything we do. It's choosing the pain of discipline over the pain of regret. Those are all things that we believe in as a program, and that I've become am blessed enough to be around every day, and have become a huge part of what I believe in as a coach and as a worker.
I love that, and I think as you again, you listen to yourself, Buzz, those that have ties to the program, like you start to quickly notice like this language isn't just the catchy sound bites that garner mainstream attention and things. Like these are actually things that are discussed and practiced and lived, as you mentioned, in the culture. And again, they're spoken about so much that they just become who you are, as you mentioned,
For
that
sure.
repeated stories and the identity. So I love that. The other side of this is when you think about the work that you and the team and the staff pour into building this culture, like there is a proactive nature that you all take to it. So right, like when you think about each year, the fresh new campaign, right? There's going to be some overlap with players or things like that or different things, but could you talk a little bit about how you all, kind of in essence from a proactive standpoint, think about the culture that you want to set for, let's just say the 2026 or the 2027, Maryland men's basketball team, and kind of how you approach that from more of a proactive lens?
Yeah, so there's a great quote by Maya Angelou. You've heard it, and it's widespread, but remember people will not remember what you said, but they'll remember how you made them feel. And so I think a lot of what we do for our players is try to evoke emotion, and try to build that belief. As we're talking about this concept of delayed gratification, I do think that's a huge part of what we do. It's almost an oxymoron. We try to compound fast, and so that takes a level of intentionality, a level of discipline, and a level of focus that we kind of hold our players to that standard, and try to create ways that we can put them in environments that will test that will expand that muscle, that will give them reps at that. Um, I think once people feel it, they're much more likely to remember it. And so a lot of our teaching, and Coach Williams is the best in the world at this, is that human to human relationship, and getting in front of them and having conversations and having real conversations. We've done at every stop I've been at with Coach Williams, life lessons they take place on the weekends, and they're 2 hours long, and it's nothing about basketball. It's about life. And so we really are going to build our program from the ground up in terms of who are you as a person, who are you as a human being, and then let's make sure we have all of that rock solid, and then we can start building the amenities of the home, the skeleton of the home, uh, in terms of who are you as a player. Skill development's obviously going to be a huge part of that, but we want to make sure that mentally, physically, and emotionally you're growing at a rate that you can be proud of. And I think that's why we've had a good retention rate over the years. I think players, again, they feel that emotion, and they go into battle or competition or hard things, and it's not just someone saying, "Hey, you can trust me." It's we have evidence of trust, right? And I think whether it's the amount of people that care and love on them, or the amount of people that coach them hard and maybe give them an uncomfortable truth a lot of the times, I think that both of those things are two important factors that go into what we try to do in terms of how we help our players and our staff grow.
I think that's brilliant in so many ways. I think I love the emphasis on emotion. Like I don't know that you're going to hear many always think with that in mind. How do I get players to feel something in this session or in this message and so forth. And there's a well-regarded psychologist in kind of sports psychology by the name of Peter Haberl, and he talks a lot about like attention is the currency of performance, right?
Mm,
Like how important focus is for us to be at our
so true.
best. But one of the add-ons that I've kind of added to it is like, okay, if attention is the currency of performance, I think emotion is the currency of learning.
Mm,
And the point being, like, right, when you tap into someone's emotion, you're going to get their attention to your point, like using the Maya Angelou
I
quote.
love
And
that.
I think that's an important piece to it is like, if you want somebody's focus, you better speak to their heart,
Yeah.
right? And this is again not to, I'll use one other quick example with staying maybe in the basketball world for a moment. One of my very first guests on the show was uh, Kevin Eastman. And Kevin's obviously done a lot in the game of basketball. He's now
Yes.
continuing to have a big impact in leadership and many different forms. And he shared something that has stuck with me ever since we first met, which was, so many people, especially in our line of work, they want to know, like, hey, what makes this person tick? And he said, that's number three on the priority list for me.
Mm, mm,
He said, the first thing is I want to know what gets them to talk.
mm.
The second thing is I want to know what gets them to listen. Because if I get them to talk and I know what makes them listen, I will understand what makes them tick. And I think you have to tie in emotion into that. Like you have to have you can't shy away from that. And so I love that that's at the root or maybe at the core of what you all create, just even beyond the performance standpoint.
And so I'll just jump in. First of all, Kevin Eastman, another Hall of Fame human being. But I love what he said and your explanation of it was what I call the raging river of human behavior. But there's a part of the river that's, in my opinion, what I've labeled it is your upstream upbringing. And I think a lot of what those first two points are on Kevin Eastman's list are determined by that, right? And so I probably should have mentioned this earlier. That's something we want to figure out is who are our players, meaning where are they from? What did they go through? What trauma did they live through? What's going to make them talk? What's going to open them up? What's going to hit on something that maybe they're not ready to talk about yet? Um, and and that pressure point is going to reveal, okay, this is how this person needs to be coached or communicated to, or loved on, or there's a myriad of different lanes and avenues and opportunities to get better once you can almost like peel back the layers of the onion. And I think you have to figure out what it is that person has been through in order to get to that point.
Hmm. That's really well said. I love the river analogy. I think that's a beautiful description, and I think it is so spot on, and this is no shade to anybody that is trying to, foster, their culture and trust and different things with, the team building exercises, right? Like some of that certainly has a ton of value or going and doing the things together as a group. There is value in all of those things.
For
And
sure.
to your point, like you all taking those 2 hours on a Saturday to open up and to like get to know one another on a human level and get to know someone's past and get to know someone's journey and the pain that they've overcome, like that becomes one of maybe the biggest accelerants of trust, of connection, all these things that we know can drive performance not only on an individual level but on a collective level. So I love that that's obviously it again, it's at the core of what you all have created and what you're continuing to create. I kind of want to, bring us here maybe kind of towards the back end of the convo and where I kind of want to go for a moment is, you've already sprinkled in so many great like lessons, stories, different things. And like, are there any particular ones that you feel that like resonate most for you that, because I know you're a great storyteller. You're a great like hunter of stories and insights. Are there ones that in particular that you really enjoy or that you've used with players or different people that have been impactful?
Yeah, I mean, there's a ton. We could probably have entire new podcast on just you and I exchanging stories on different ideas or play things that
That
the
would be
players have
hard to
latched
do.
onto. Yeah, I mean, I think it depends on the team. It depends on the season, like off season, in season. Are you in a winning streak? Are you in a losing streak? One thing that I think definitely holds true, no matter what the message is the ones that land the most are usually the simplest ones. Um, Sometimes less is more, and the goal of every message, in my opinion, you can kind of strip away all of the fluff or added content, as long as you accomplish these three things. You want to make the important truth simple enough to understand. You want to make it meaningful enough to believe, and then you want to make it practical enough to live. And I think we try to do that with our players, dependent on that season, dependent on that uh, kid, the individual slash the collective group. Obviously, there's the kids we're coaching today are completely different than the kids we coached 10 years ago, and that's just the nature of their upbringings and what's going on around them, and the NIL and transfer portal being real tools that they can use. And so I think we try to take complex ideas and make them clear, memorable, and emotionally resonant. And so, for example, like this year, we give out quote shirts, and those are just specifically for our players and our staff. We only make 30 of them, and they have a life lesson printed on them. And that life lesson will come organically. Like it could come in the last media timeout of a game at Purdue. It could come in a film session in October when we're putting in our first baseline out of bounds play. It could come in the summer when a player ends the workout being vulnerable and sharing something they learned or something that they went through their life uh, recently. And so one of the ones that we brought that we gave to the players this year that I think really resonated on me, just because I was in a season of life where I needed that message and was powerful and impactful to see it latch on or have sticking power with the players too. The quote was, "The giants you face won't change, but you can." And I think that really I became a father in the last 2 years, and you know this as well as I do. There's a level of pressure and adversity and just change and environment speed or volatility that happens when you have a child. Like it changes your whole dynamic, changes you and your spouse's dynamic, and you can either be adaptable and malleable, and fatherhood is a great blessing, but you're gonna carry a lot of weight, and that's just the way we're biologically wired, right? And so take that philosophy or that concept of rapid weight change to your ship or your backpack, and apply it to anything, whether you're a player, whether you're a coach, whether you work in law, whether you're a doctor, whether you're a janitor. uh, you're going to respond differently to that. You're going to have questions. You're going to start to have conversations internally about that. And so we were at a point in our season when we were really hitting a wall, and I think that outside noise started to creep into our group and inside our walls a little bit, and it was causing a little bit of frustration and maybe a little bit of anxiety, and maybe that pressure was starting to rise a little bit more. Uh, and I think the quote's genius is that the obstacles in front of us are fixed, right? You can't change the world. You can't change what people think of you. You can't change outcomes that happened in the past. It's like the great Lion King clip. The past is the past. You can either learn from it or run from it. And so that quote, I think really resonated with our guys because I think at that age you're going through a lot of things that are like being a father. It's almost like the human tribal universal rite of passage into manhood, right? Like you're finally on your own. You're finally living in a place different than your parents. You might be making money now. You may have responsibility or other humans depending on you in a real way. um, all of those things are going to stay constant, and so you can't change any of those things. You can't wish them away. You can't beat them with just pure force or work or intense burnout level pursuit. It's just not sustainable. But you can change the way you frame those problems, right? And I think it goes back to what we were talking about earlier. You can focus on the process and getting better every day and attacking those problems or those giants, and almost judging yourself off of who you were yesterday, not who you are on Twitter or who you are in, your fear of someone else's perception, and really changing the way that you view those problems, and getting 1% better every day, to go back to your point on that, and look back after enough days, and then those giants will look a lot smaller, right? Like if you're going over a mountain, and that mountain's going to hurt and feel really heavy, and that climb's going to be steep. But as you get 100 days or 100 steps over that mountain, and toward the next mountain, you're going to look back, and that mountain's going to be really small, right? So I think that's just one a version of a quote shirt, or a life lesson that we try to pack that into everything we do as a program, because again, going back to you phrased it perfectly. Emotion is the key to all this. It's making people feel like we're together, like we love one another, and really channeling that chemical reaction in your brain that will make people go a little bit further, compete a little bit harder, and maybe sacrifice a little bit more to become the best versions of ourselves collectively and individually.
Love that. Love that. I think that's a great message. And again, like so many things that we've described, it is certainly not just a quote or words. It's so cool to hear. I think how you all bring it to life and how you add the nuance and how you make it meaningful. To your point earlier, for not just the great, a catchy message that's been simplified. It's meaningful, and here's why, and here's how, and then here's how to live it. The last two questions that I had for you to kind of bring us, I've kept you, I think, long enough, but these are two that I definitely don't want to skip over. We started the conversation, as I mentioned, that for those that may not be familiar with you, like your appetite for growth and development for yourself, even like you were very much a model of that, as well as for others. And so I'm curious, when you talk about your role, director of process, and also having systems and things, like what's one system for you that you feel like has maybe disproportionately almost improved your own effectiveness or enhanced your own growth?
Mm. That's a good question. This is one that's recently impacted me in a positive way, and I think I mentioned it already earlier on. But there's this concept of an abundance mindset, and I think we all live in some form or fashion with a scarcity brain. It's how we're wired. We're going to hoard resources. We're naturally inclined to be worried about losing the race, losing what we've accomplished, losing our next meal. Those are just innate, I think, human qualifications based on how we've been wired over time. And we don't live in a world necessarily where you need to worry about that stuff. And one of the things with the abundance mindset that's really triggered me or made me aware of maybe areas I can get better is um, over the last 100 days, or let's say the last year, how many days have I given up because I was too anxious to do the extra rep? I was too tired to give 100% energy to that task. I was too overwhelmed for my energy, my focus, my intentionality to be completely consumed with what it was I was doing, because maybe it didn't have the same prestige, or there wasn't the same uh, risk reward attached to it as playing in the Super Bowl or playing in the national championship. And what I've realized is you don't get to the Super Bowl or national championship of whatever it is you're trying to do. Whether you're the director of process at Maryland, or whether you're working for the Diamondbacks, or whether you're in law, or whether you're a freshman in college, you have this idea of what the Super Bowl is, and you want to get there. And if you let yourself be ruled by your scarcity brain, thinking that that rep or today didn't go the way it was supposed to go in my mind. I failed that test. Now I'm going to give up the next 7 weeks so I can eat comfort food and watch TV, and I'll be back in a week and I'll try again. That's fine. I think that's a healthy process of attacking it. I think I'm not here to judge anyone who does that. Personally, for me, I felt like I was doing that too much, and so I think I owe this to my brother Brandon, who I mentioned earlier. I got to go to his press conference in McAllen, Texas, when he was introduced as the head coaches of UTRGV. And I was around him, and I asked him, I was like, "Hey, man, like this is incredible, but like, aren't you scared? Yeah, like, aren't you overwhelmed? Like, what's going on in your brain?" And he just kind of almost had like a delusional confidence of no, because I trust my work. I know I can create an environment that I feel like and believe trends towards winning and building student athletes who I can be proud of that played under me. And it was like without a beat, no hesitation, he answered that question. I could tell he was so calm, and it got me on this path of okay, I need to live more days like that. Like trust your work, trust the person that you think you are, and then live that out daily and get away from the fear of what other people might think of you or the fear of failure and these almost imagined fears that we all have and are normal. And again, like no denying it. I'll raise my hand. I'm the first one to admit I have those more often than I'd like to. But if we can get away from that and just remind ourselves constantly, you can always create a solution to a problem. There's no doubt that you can't. Now, it might not be the solution that is necessarily perceived as right for you in that moment, but there is a solution. Like going back to that quote, the giants you face won't change, but you can. You can either change it, you can leave it, or you can change how you think about it, right? And so I think that abundance mindset is basically just approaching all problems with that mindset. Is I can always create a solution, and I can't give away days because I'm emotional or I feel like I'm resisting this pain. I think pain is inevitable. I think suffering is optional, right? Suffering is this belief that it should have gone different, like the outcome should have been different, and trying to remove that from the equation, I think, has made me more effective over time, right? Like if I can evaluate myself over the last week or 10 days or 100 days, can I be a little bit better in each day? And I think having an abundance mindset and just viewing every problem right that like that and then trying to pass that down to our players and our staff and the people I'm around, my family. That's where I think that reward is really yielded, right? Like you can pour those days into the people you love or the people that you hope you have impact with.
Hmm. What a great, what a great response. I think there's a couple of things that I think are important. Maybe much like yourself, when you spend time around top performers in their given crafts, I think for many there's always the questions around again, well, what makes this person tick, or how do they think, or what do they like, and I think sometimes I've gotten asked, have there been any surprises and or are there misconceptions, and I think
Yeah.
one misconception sometimes is that these top performers are absent of the self-doubt or of the fear or of the
Mm.
anxiety. And the reality is like that is certainly not the case. We all are card-carrying members of the human race, and we all have emotions, and we all experience the full range of those in our own form. And
Yes.
so, the first thing that I think great about what you shared as it ties into your own journey is like that. I've used this a lot in different forms recently of like I think mental strength is not about positive thinking as much as it is about how do you take positive action no matter what you're thinking, feeling,
I love that.
right? Like you can have self-doubt, you can have hesitation, you can have fear, and you can choose to trust yourself. You can
Yeah.
choose to give your best effort or stay committed to the mission or whatever that is. That to me, I think is an important distinction. The one other thing that I wanted to highlight that you said, I've never thought about this in this form, but when you use that term of like giving away days, I love that because and I don't know about other sport, like all other sports, I don't know if it applies, but in baseball we talk a lot about like hitters, for example. The last thing you want to do is give away an at bat. Giving away
Yeah.
the at bat is generally when you don't have a good process going into it, or you don't commit to the process. Maybe your focus is scattered, right? You get in between. Those at bats, and we often those are the at bats that keep people up at night. And then those are also where we talk a lot about. It's like we're not going to maybe get rid of all of those, but if we could cut those in half, you'd
Yeah.
probably feel way better about your season, your career, and the results would probably reflect that. But
Right.
what I love that I didn't think about until you shared this is that idea of giving away days or moments is so relevant to all of us in day to day, right? That giving away a moment, and I can raise my hand, I've been guilty of all of these, is like the moment where you're with a group or you're with your family or whatever, and like your mind
Mm.
is elsewhere. And next thing you know, it's like time has passed and you don't even really have that like that vivid memory of what transpired. You're physically there, but mentally you're absent. The giving away a moment is when you have an opportunity to tell someone the truth, and you might be the first person that has ever told them or been willing to challenge them, and like you stay silent. So sometimes that giveaway is in action as much as it is what you do. So I just and those are just two quick examples, but I think there's so many opportunities even in that to think about how do we, again, not that we're going to be perfect, but how do we just maybe reduce some of those in our day-to-day life, and how much more do we show up fully as the best version of ourselves, um, as human beings in that process by doing so?
Right. And I think it's so important to almost double down on what you said. We're not even talking about the outcomes when we say give it away. We're talking about what was your mentality like in that moment, because those moments, you can't get those moments back. You can't, uh, and again, going back to how you made someone feel, like you can't, if you're worried about you striking out the day before and it impacts your wife or your teammate or your coach, you gave away that moment, and then there's a negative consequence to that that is impacting others. And I think, it's that peace that you want to protect, right? And that it's going to feel bad striking out. Don't get me wrong. We're not saying like you're never going to strike out. Don't give away the moment. We're saying, at least to my understanding, we're agreeing on this. We're saying, don't let that moment, uh, don't time travel back to that moment as you progress. Have a presence and be where your feet are, and understand that bad moments are going to happen, and adjust for that. And that reframe of, what can I do to change the outcome the next time? And you always have that ability. Don't give away that power. And then I think you touched on it brilliantly. Um, I think, at least in my life, and I did this way too long. I looked up at all of my heroes and I said, "Oh wow, they're superheroes." And what I realized is they're not superheroes. They're what you said. They're just people who were willing to keep trying and keep banging that rock, and didn't give up, and didn't quit when, the fear of failure, or those moments that really hurt their ego, or put them down or made them feel inadequate. They didn't walk away from the gold mine that was, just a few feet away, if they just kept picking that axe. A lot of them are human like us. They have the same emotions. They fail. They bleed. They worry about what people think about them. They don't know what to say when maybe the situation calls for it. And they're just people who constantly failed again and again and again, and started learning from it and reframing it as, what can I use this opportunity, or what can I use this information as, to form another opportunity? And I think I used to believe that people I admired were fundamentally different than me, and I've since gotten away from, this almost gravitational pull back to, um, average, or whatever, cocoon I think is safe, and staying in this level of safety that won't allow me to fail, and not be hung over by the emotional pull of regret, or, um, you know, uh, anxiety, or any of those things that we feel in emotions where things don't go our way. And I think that's been a huge game changer, not only for me as a worker, or in my professional pursuits, but also as a in my family, and in my relationships, and in my head, like how I can now, process different things, and be present, and enjoy, and get more out of every single moment, or almost get more juice out of those precious moments like you described.
Hmm. I love that. Yeah, I have one last question, Josh. And this is what I try to ask at the end of most interviews, but What's one thing that you're proud of that maybe you don't always get an excuse to talk about?
Yeah, I love that question. So I do this every podcast. I'm gonna do it now. Thankfully, you asked that because I'm not, I owe all of my success to my beautiful wife. And so what I'm proud of has nothing to do with my job title. I'm most proud of being a husband and a father, and I think that's the team that matters most. I think my wife has seen me at those lowest points that I've mentioned, professionally, personally, emotionally. She's seen the doubts, the fears, the stress, the moments where quitting felt easier than continuing, and she stuck with me. And so I think that kind of belief is the best gift you can give to someone. And I'm super proud to be her husband. I think that's the best accolade I'll ever achieve. And I think knowing the person she is, how big her heart is, how humble she is, her sense of joy, the way she treats our dog, and the way she treats her former boss is no different. Like she's just that good of a human being. And I think that says a lot about me that I'm married to her. And so I think that is something I'm really proud of. And then our son, we have a beautiful boy who's going to turn 2 soon. I'm very proud of being his father. I think he's given me a different perspective on life. I think he's children in general just have a way of exposing how small and almost meaningless things that we worry about. Uh, they're just completely irrelevant in the eyes of the youth. And I think his curiosity, his confidence, his joy, they're daily reminders of me to move with more wonder and less fear. And I think that's a huge conviction for me as much as I care about the work that I'm doing. The accomplishment that I value most, bar none, is the family that I get to represent. And every day I go to work knowing that my name's attached to them. And that perspective brings a lot of humility and gratitude. And I would be remiss if I didn't mention them at some point during this podcast, because I truly believe in the end, the most success is not what you build for yourself, but it's what you build in trust, or are entrusted by others, those that you lead and those that you represent in terms of your family, and those are the people who matter most. And Naval Ravikant has he's one of my superheroes, so to speak. He has a great quote that I have written in my journal, and on the first page, it's my core beliefs on life, and I just keep adding to that page, and at some point I'll be old and fill up the page, but um, his quote is, "Your family is broken, comma, but you're going to try to fix the world, question mark." And I think it's such a powerful reminder that, like, as much as we all want to be the head coach or the CEO, or we want to be the best in whatever it is we're pursuing, um, start with your family. Like if you can be in a healthy marriage, then maybe you can be the head coach of having a child. And then if you can raise a child the right way, you can maybe you can lead a team the right way. And if you can lead a team the right way, maybe you can lead a company the right way. And then if you can lead a company the right way, maybe you can lead a cause the right way. And I think that that evolution, or that metamorphosis, and reminder that, hey, there's going to be problems that come up every day of my life, because that's just the way life is. Um, I shouldn't try to fix all the problems. I should focus on the ones that impact the people that matter most. And so I'm super proud of those people sticking by me, and our players and our staff are obviously an extended part of my family. Those people as well. I'm proud to be associated with our staff. I think we have a ton of future Hall of Famers that I'm around every day. And then our players, I wouldn't have a job without them. Like, they're the lifeblood of this organization and this sport, and sports in general. So I think those layers, of family and extended family are the things I'm most proud of. And hopefully, uh, I feel like I feel convicted and confident that I've given back to them, and will continue to do so at an even more increased rate going forward.
Mhm. Awesome. Josh, I just want to again thank you, man, for doing this, not only for the last hour plus that I've had you and a chance to share with others kind of, I think, the wisdom, the perspective, the journey that you've had, and the impact that you're currently having and will continue to have. I'm grateful for that, but also just I'm grateful for the conversations that we've had, how I keep learning from you every time we speak, whether it's directly or from afar. And so, um, for those that, again, if in case somebody has not come across where they can kind of stay connected with you, learn from you, I wanted to give you a last moment here too. If there's ways that people can connect or follow, what's the best way to do so?
Yeah, definitely. I appreciate it. You can follow me on. I'm trying to lean into technology more, and I think you're an example, a living example of the beauty and the power of social media and how you can meet people and connect with people and learn things that you couldn't even 10, 20 years ago. So I'm really accessible in a lot of different areas these days. I think Twitter is probably, or X is the easiest way to find me at Josh Chambers. My Substack at Burnt Toast Theory. It's kind of just a little bit of what we've talked about over the last couple of hours, just a reframe on problems as opportunities. And then I want to give you a shout out, Zach. I think it takes a lot of vulnerability and conviction to start a podcast. And I think I read this the other day, and I don't know if these numbers are true, but I think that the overall premise is 90% of podcasts quit before the third episode, and then 90% of the remaining ones quit before the 20th episode. And so you're in the 99th percentile of all podcasts ever created. And I think what you do speaks to your consistency and your passion and not being rooted in outcomes or wanting to achieve anything other than the help that you're offering and the conversation you're providing that are impacting so many, and then making conversations like this happen where we can kind of connect on different things that hopefully might impact one person today. But I know, because I know the human that you are and how smart you are, a million people will watch your podcast at some point, and you're in that 99th percentile. So I wanted to give you a shout out and just I appreciate you having me on, man. I can't thank you enough. I know I won't be the most entertaining guest you've ever had, but I certainly this will be one of the most memorable experiences of our relationship because it means a lot that you would ask me.
Yeah. No, again, the respect, everything, very mutual, man. So I appreciate those words and selfishly doing this project now for I think we just recently eclipsed a year, and it has been very, from a selfish standpoint, it's been a lot of fun to talk to cool ass people like
That's
yourself
awesome.
and
Yeah,
learn and all that. I've had a blast. So I'm grateful again for you and Josh, best of luck, obviously, as the next season, unfolds and with what you and Buzz and the group are building there. So again, thanks for taking some time.
I appreciate it, Zach. Thank you.